Hello, hello. This is Chris Park from Arcane Games, and this is finally the last piece of the puzzle to actually take one of these models that we've been working on and actually get it into the game. So I know that people will have been looking forward to that. So, um, first of all, um, one of the things that you'll find, and um, I actually kind of undid this by accident. One of the things that you'll find by default for a lot of these ships that we're replacing, they already have existing models in place, right? And so we're going to want to get the new ones in there instead. So first of all, please click into the old ones. And if you expand them, you'll find a renderer in there somewhere or more than one renderer. You can click on the mesh filter to find where the base mesh is, and then you can just go in and delete it. However, that's not the only one because it probably has LODs. So if you expand the LODs, probably old style, but maybe new style, then you'll find other ones. So the first one's missing. That's good. Now you've got LOD 1, 2A, and 3. Come in here. There's also another thing just called Bomber. That is old. So we'll just get rid of all of those. We'll get rid of that whole folder, in fact. I don't want those things accidentally getting sent to the game. And now we've got, okay, so now all those are gone, hooray. But when we look down here at the renderer, we've still got the textures. This is actually the bigger piece of data. And so come in here, I've just clicked on all the references I saw to it. And there's the 4 that I should expect for each individual renderer on the old ones. And those are all gone now. And now I can click here, and there's the actual material. Goodbye. Now when I click select here, this is the prefab that brought everything together. I'm going to delete that. Old one is gone. Remember that this stuff is all in SVN, so if you accidentally delete something you didn't mean to, you can easily revert it, and we can always bring it back in the future even if you commit it. So nothing is truly lost that gets deleted, so don't worry about that. Okay, so got rid of the old bomber. Now I've got this new bomber that has, you know, the mesh and stuff that I set up, but it doesn't have any it doesn't have any game logic attached to it. Now I've made new and simpler game logic that's more efficient and easier to set up, and it assumes that you only have a single mesh renderer and mesh filter though, and that's what this tutorial is going to be about. Looking at something like the arc, can't quite use the new and simpler one. It has to use the older and more complicated one, but things like the arc are few and far between, and honestly, aside from new arcs, I don't think there's going to be anything else that we're going to want to have more than one piece of. All the big old guardians and all that stuff should all be just a single piece. So we're not going to do, like with the space dock, for example, previously, we've got it in 2 parts, in inner and outer, so they can rotate. That rotation is so subtle, and it uses up a bunch of CPU that we don't need to be using, and it just in general adds to the chaos of extra code. So we're going to clean that out and not use it. Okay. So first of all, we need to check our list and see what it is we're supposed to be doing for the bomber. So the bomber is under fleet ships. If you don't know, you can just search, find the scale. The scale is 2. So these cubes here are meant to be as rough guidelines for the scale. So if you don't know what one is, you can just click it twice and it'll tell you there. Okay, so that's 4 units I can see. This one here is the one that's 2 units. So in general, these should be about the same size as that. And I say in general and about because we want to have an overall rough idea of what the size is, but it's not something where it needs to be super exact. So whoop, where'd that go? Okay. Oh, all right. Hmm, okay. So here, I've gone ahead and put it here. I think it is, about the right size. I'm pretty happy with that. Might make it just a tad bit bigger. So hit the R key and then use the center one to bring it up evenly. So now what I need to do is I need to hit Arkin, hit add component, Arkin, viz, and I want Arkin visual solo mesh ship. And that's going to add this thing, and it's immediately yelling at me that there's some stuff wrong with it. Go ahead and just hit auto fix things wrong with this object. Boom, most of the stuff is already fixed. You'll notice it added a collider, and this collider right here may or may not be showing exactly like you see it there. It may look like this instead. In order to switch between that, go under AOM at the top and then Arkin Object Manager and switch on or off drawing boxes for the box colliders. You probably want to go ahead and leave it on. If you've got a ship where this is the bounding cube, well, not cube, but bounding box anyway that goes around it. And if you've got something that is very uneven, like this has bits that stick out a lot and it has this little spire. So for the cube, see how I've brought it in on the sides? You can do this sort of thing and say, okay, I don't want it to be quite so big as it was because we'll be misclicking, accidentally clicking it a lot of times. By the way, see how the handle there is getting in the way? If you hit Q and get rid of the handle, then you can easily edit it. Just a quick side note. For the space stack, I'm going to go ahead and revert that for now. All right, so for this guy, he's all set up. I'm happy enough with his bounding box. So what we're going to do is we're going to define the series of meshes that he goes through as part of his level of detail transitions and at what distances he goes through them. Down here, there's some little helpful stuff that shows you how far away we are right now. That's how far away the main camera is. So if you're just looking in the scene view camera, that's not going to be helpful. You need to use screen link and show the game view, and then that will show you how far away you are. So for instance, this is distance 20 from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 array entries. I'm going to add 2 distance entries. It disappeared. What's going on? The reason is it's set to 0 on this, which means start showing whatever's in the first array element, or second array element immediately. So it's showing no mesh. And so you'll see up here, there is actually should be saying, interesting, should be saying a mesh that it's showing, but it's not. Whatever. What we need to do is just fill this in. So bomber here. Oh, I see why. It's because it's actually triggering to the last LED shown is 2. That's why. And then bomber LED 1 here. So we've got the LED 0, full quality, LED 1, much lower quality. We want to, this last element, you can set to something really high, like 6,000, and that's basically saying, when do we stop drawing this at all? Past a certain point, let's just not even draw this. It's too small. It's too small to bother drawing. Before that, it's starting to say, when do we switch from the thing above it? So there's nothing above LOD 0. So there's never a question of when do we switch to that. That's just what gets used unless we're going to something else. So this element 0 here says, when do we switch from element 0 to element 1? Right now, it switches immediately. So you can see right now it's showing LOD 1 at present, displaying LOD 1 or a distance 2.5. That we want to show LOD 0 sometimes though, so we don't want 0. I'm going to guess and say that 20 would make sense. And you can see that immediately we've switched to displaying LOD 0. We're at distance 2.5 still. This makes sense. Let's back up some. We can test our theory about how this will look. I just passed 20.7, and you can see it went from 0 to 1, 0 to 1. Yeah, all right, cool. So let's back up more. All right, so now we're 192 away from it. Gosh, you know what? I think we could probably safely say at 1,000, stop drawing this. It's so darn small. You know, let's just be safe and just say 2,000, just in case. We hit apply. Notice that since we hit fix all the problems, said selectable ship and all that. Now, when we hit apply, something bad happened. If we hit select and we look at this thing, now I'm looking at the one that's in the file system. It is showing Bomber LOD1. Whoops. And it's showing us locked in to a different place. We don't want that. So what we need to do is select the Bomber here. Go ahead and hit F to bring myself in. Hit safe apply prefab. Use this. That's right. And then when we click to the prefab, you'll see that it is still using the wrong thing. Well, at any rate, if there's anything like an overriding test LOD, which you can use, by the way, to go force LOD 1, force LOD, or 0, force LOD 1, etc., you can set those sort of things up and clear overrides. It should, yep. When I did a safe apply prefab, then it switched this to be what it thinks of as the defaults. So for some reason, it thinks the default mesh on this is Bomber LOD1. I honestly don't care because it's going to set that in the game whenever it needs to. It's a little weird, but it got rid of the overriding test LOD, which is good. Last thing that we need to do, well, last two things. There's this line miss hit and hit point here. If we want a specific place for it to be shooting bullets out of and getting shot at, then we would do this by making a sub-object miss and hit point. And you don't have to call it that, but you can. And we can say, all right, well, I want it to be more like right here. And then you can say, all right, this is now where it gets shot and where it shoots from. Right now, the center of the mesh is right there, and it's a little bit back. This thing is so small, I don't actually care. So I'm going to get rid of the miss and hit point, and I'm going to drag the bomber onto itself in that spot. And so now it says bomber transform instead, and I hit apply. And hit safe apply. And so there we go. Next thing is we've got our prefab here in this folder, and I think that's fine. I don't think we need to move it around. The old prefabs I was putting in this ARC and bundle section way off somewhere. And I think we're going to wind up getting rid of everything that's in the ARC and bundle folder. So one step at a time, though. Next thing is we have to make sure this actually goes in the goodie box, and it's not gonna right now. What we want to go in the goodie box specifically is this prefab. So we're going to say asset bundle. You can't see that. You click the prefab in the project view, asset bundle, AI War 2 goodie box. You check that. At this time, you really, really, really need to hit save all assets because that is going to commit that save. Otherwise, it's probably not really committing it. Now, we do a build Windows Asset Bundle, and it should go pretty quick because it's going to do incremental builds for you. So basically, it's not building the entire asset bundle. It still has a bunch of the pieces already pre-built. So it's just going to mostly take out the old bomber that we've deleted as part of what I just showed you and put in the new bomber. Now, problem is the location of the old bomber and the location of the new bomber, their prefabs, are two different places. And so now the game is going to be broken. While this is building, let's go ahead and look in our game folder here. So this is in the game data folder underneath the central install folder. Then you go into configuration and you go into game entity. At this point, one of the things I like to do is in one of my Visual Studio projects, I like to, hey, come on. I like to take all of the ones that exist and just drag them on in. And then that way I can easily switch between any of them by clicking this little tick here and then going up and down. And I can also do a search and find anything wherever it might be. So I can do a search, for instance, for bomber. That may or may not find anything. Display name bomber, sure. Okay. So when I double click that, here I am. So this is the entity called Bomber Mark 1. Doesn't matter what that's called. Its visuals are pointing to this, and it's automatically looking in the goodie box. Now, this is where it used to be. That is no longer where it is. We got to go back and look at what our URL is in the asset bundle. That's still building, so we can't easily do that right now, but we'll have to update that path. Now, there are 5 marks of bomber. These other marks right here, all they do is just copy from bomber mark 1, and they set what tech prerequisite they have, and then they set some balance stuff that is Keith based, and that's it. They don't have any different visuals, and all the other kind of baseline stuff is just being scaled a certain way. So we don't have to redefine that for the higher marks. When we're talking about a guardian, what you're going to wind up doing is, okay, this is finished now. So for a guardian, what you're going to wind up doing is you're going to do something like this. So you've got your existing bomber. We're going to make a copy of it. I just hit Control D, drag it over here, and then I'm just going to scale this whole thing up some. And then I'm going to call this Bomber 2. Why not? And I'm going to drag that there. And that made a new prefab. Call this Bomber 3. Scale this up some, move it over just to get it out of the way. Drag this over here. Make sure that both of these are in the AI War 2 goodie box, and do save all assets and do an asset bundle build. At this point, I have bomber, bomber 2, bomber 3. So the path is assets, and this all needs to be lowercase, final game meshes underscore. So assets, final game meshes, fleet ships, bomber, and then bomber.prefab. That's the path of this particular thing. It lowercases it all when it puts it into the asset bundle, though. If I then want to have Mark 2 and Mark 3 look different, all I have to do is just add a visuals line in here, and I can just say bomber 2 and bomber 3. And then those two will use these prefabs, which have just scaled up the bomber. That's it. And it'll use that instead of using the original. So when you're setting up the Guardians and the Starships, that's it. That's all you have to do. So that's pretty handy, and it's vastly easier than what it used to be. The Guardians, setting those up individually was like a 6-hour job previously for synth and so forth. It was not a fun thing. I, on the other hand, we don't need bigger bombers for those. Incidentally, since we are just scaling up meshes and materials, GPU instancing still works just fine with that. So, and that also brings up another point. So we have to make sure that GPU instancing is turned on, which the warnings here should tell you if it's not. But under the material, it should say enable instancing, and that should be checked. It should, let's test. Yep. If that's not, it'll yell at you. Should be able to hit autofix. It won't be able to fix that one piece. So you're like, why is this not fixing it? What's going on? You go into the material and click enable instancing, and you're good to go. All right. At this point, we now have bombers, and they should be in the game, but we don't really have a great way of, I mean, you're going to play the game until you see the bombers. That's easy enough for bombers, maybe, but what about something obscure? And besides which, you got a lot of ships to do. Never fear. Make sure and take this back out. But what we're going to do, you can put it right up next to here if you want, is put in test underscore spawn underscore for underscore player. So test spawn for player equals true. So what that means is when you first start the game, it is now going to give you a squad of bombers. And at that point, you can look at it and see if it looks like what you want. Now, there's a couple of components to that. It is still trying to open the old location for some reason. Bomber underscore H. Yeah, you can't find that. Why are you looking for it? Oh, okay. There are two other places that for some reason were referencing the bomber. One being this bomber drone, and the other being this part of the nanocost. Great example of why it's nice to open all of that in Visual Studio at once. The shortcut for doing a find all like that is Control Shift F, and then that'll let you search in the entire solution / all documents you have open. All right, so now it opens just fine. Hit start game, and I'm in. Now I've got bombers here of all of the different marks. I can go ahead and hit P and pause it so that nothing is bothering me. So I can see that they're there in their formations, and they're very small, that's for sure. I can hit caps lock to go into a mode where if I hold down the middle mouse button, I can then move around using the Unity type keys. So instead of it being the right mouse button, you use the middle mouse button. So I can come down in here and look. I can see, yep, that's the new bomber I set up all right. Looks like it's working just fine. They're so small though. That's so there's two other pieces of information here at this point that we may as well look at. One is the scale of the ring around them. Does it fit? And two is the scale of the or the type of formation that they're using. And this is a neat formation, but it's very flat. So that means the bombers can only be so big. And these bombers just feel too small to me. They're so small. I'm going to hit caps lock again, get out of free look mode. So these bombers are so small. They're basically, if I'm not in a cinematic mode, they are just specks. That's it. They're just specks. And I don't like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a different formation for them, a different grid, and we're going to make them bigger so they fit into that better. And that's going to be a judgment call sort of thing that we do with each ship as it's integrated in. Technically, the job of integrating it is now done, and I don't want to change the radius of this, because the more we change, if we increase the radius of the ship, which, by the way, the radius is just defined right here as 80. You can increase it or decrease it some, but if you increase it or decrease it a lot, then we're going to run into problems where it's just not going to fit. The gravity well is going to be too busy. You'll also notice that over here on the side, this is kind of sticking out a little bit, so they're going to overlap improperly sometimes. So I'm going to make a separate video for it, but we're going to address the sizing there as we go. And for now, what you would want to do is under the fleet ships here, you would take out test spawn for player, check this in, and you're done. That's it for now, but I'm going to make another follow-up about the grids, and the scaling will be included in that. Thanks for watching.